So we'll talk about 15 ways you can improve your sales team's performance and productivity. And for those of you who might not know me, my name is Manusas and I have worked with over 120 entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and executives to help them maximize their mental performance, work output, and productivity so they can make more money in the business while performing at their peak. So the first thing you can do to your sales team to maximize their performance and productivity is track their sleep quality. Use something like an Oura ring, like I do right here, or a Whoop band to quantify their sleep quality and recovery and see what do they need to do to wake up feeling energized and productive and motivated and sharp. The second thing you have to do is track their blood work. By tracking their blood work, you're going to see their hormone levels, things like testosterone levels, nutrient deficiencies, metabolic health, their thyroid levels, their glucose levels. All of those things might sound curious to you. Like you're probably like, why do I even need to do those things? But you need to understand how important hormone levels and metabolic health and nutrient deficiencies is for mental performance, because things like testosterone levels, estrogen levels, cortisol levels directly affect how your closer thinks, reacts to situations, how stressed they are, how well they're able to recover and sleep, and also their energy levels and clarity and focus throughout the day. So this will impact their self performance. So by tracking their blood work, you're going to be able to see what exactly goes on their biology to be able to optimize it and fix it. The third way is by following a consistent sleep schedule, having them follow a consistent sleep schedule for 80% of the time. This is one of the biggest and most important needle movers for their circadian clock. Essentially, your brain has a clock that controls the production of hormones, neurochemicals, things like adrenaline, dopamine, cortisol, melatonin, everything that you can think of, your digestion, your breath, your blood pressure, your body temperature is regulated by a big clock inside your brain that works under a circadian rhythm. So the best way to control, one of the best ways and the most important ways to control that circadian rhythm is by going to bed and waking up at the same time for 80% of the time at least. And that is going to allow your body to rewire that clock and sync it so that when you wake up in the morning at a specific time, at your given wake up time, you're going to have high energy levels, high focus, high productivity. And when you go to bed at your specific time, you're going to be able to recover and sleep well. And you're going to be able to track that with the sleep tracker here. Way number 4, you want to exercise right before work. And all of the neuroscientific literature and studies shows how important exercising right before the most important and mentally draining part of the day is, which means if your closer takes calls in the morning, it is the best practice for that closer to work out and exercise right before that block. So for example, for me, I usually start my work and I do my deep work around 9 to 10 a.m. That means for me, I exercise right before that. So I wake up at 7, I do my workout right after I work out, after like 30 to 40 minutes, and that helps me get into a mental primed state for peak focus. The next thing is getting a 10K lux light tool for morning light exposure. Now, we talked about circadian clock, and we talked about how this is the thing that controls the production of hormones, neurochemicals, but most importantly, your sleep and wake cycle and the consistency of energy levels in the morning and wakefulness, alertness, and productivity, as well as recovery at night. One of the biggest things that you can do for your team is to have them follow a specific routine. One of the key components in that routine is exposing themselves to bright overhead lights or sunlight, which is the most important thing. So something like sunlight exposure, is going to be phenomenal for energy levels, circadian clock, mood, focus, and productivity. However, if you have somebody who wakes up in a different, let's say, schedule and the sun isn't up yet, or if they live in the UK where it's gloomy and gray for the majority of the day, then what you can do is use a light tool like this here, which essentially emits a ton of brightness. The particular one is a 10,000 lux device that you can have in front of you. Like, for example, for me right now, I have this very, very bright Elgato key light, like you can see in front of you right now, that I switch the brightness. And when I turn that on in the morning, first thing in the morning, it emits a ton of brightness. And as a result of that, it syncs my circadian clock to produce cortisol, wake me up, produce dopamine, and sync my circadian clock to have energy and a healthy circadian rhythm. The next thing is going to be optimize your salesperson's calendar according to their circadian clock. So, for example, for me, if I wake up at 7 and go to bed at 10, which I do, then I need to optimize if I want to perform at my peak and leverage my calendar for peak performance in terms of sales. I would want to optimize the first 8 hours of the day, 8 to 10 hours of the day, and have them with the highest performing sales calls. Now, you can still take calls later in the day, but just you need to expect that those calls aren't going to be as effective and as productive, which means you want to take your most important calls in the first 8 to 10 hours of the day. So, and that is provided that we're following every one of the previous pointers, because if you don't follow a consistent sleep schedule for 80% of the time and you're waking up and going to bed at random times every day, then you are putting your circadian clock in a permanently confused jet lag zone. Because what needs to happen in order for your circadian clock to sync, your brain needs to produce those two hormones, cortisol and melatonin, as you can see here. You need to produce high cortisol in the morning, and then it kind of goes down after as the day progresses, and then when you go to bed, you produce enough melatonin to be able to recover and feel sleepy. And this is a clock. This functions behind a clock, because this needs to happen exactly. This graph needs to be exactly like you see here in the screen. If it doesn't look like it, then it's probably because your circadian clock is out of whack. And you need to do things that amplify your cortisol production in the morning, hence sunlight, exercise, and something that will get your heart rate up. And as a result of that, by doing the things that we're gonna walk through here, as well as the next ones here, as well as the things that we've already talked about here, you're going to allow your body to lower cortisol levels and then increase melatonin levels as the day progresses and you enter the night, which will allow you to have a lot of energy here and a lot of focus, so that you leverage high productivity and high quality work and a lot of closed deals and recover here. So we need to understand that if we want to be performing at our peak, if we expect our closers to be at their peak, we can't expect them to be at their peak all the time throughout the day, because we are going to perform naturally at our highest level here. So in the first 8 hours of the day is when we should leverage our calendar for high performance. After cortisol goes down and melatonin starts going up, and you're awake for 12, 13 hours, then your body is naturally going to feel tired. There is a tiredness chemical in your brain called adenosine, which is the main chemical, by the way, caffeine blocks to not make you feel tired. So adenosine is something that naturally starts building up the longer you're awake for, and it's the chemical that builds up the need for sleep. Without adenosine, you never feel tired, and as a result of that, your brain never gets the signal that you need to fall asleep and recover. So knowing all those things that you now know, you need to understand how important optimizing your sales calendar is, or your salesperson sales calendar is, for peak performance. The next thing is going to be help them optimize their light viewing behaviors. So as we understand here, we have particular cells in our eyes that detect bright overhead light, aka the thing that I have in front of me right now, and helps us sync our circadian clock. So we have particular cells in our eyes that detect bright overhead light and sync our circadian clock and wakes us up. At the exact same time, during the evening, those cells in our eyes are super sensitive to bright overhead light, because in the morning they're unsensitive. They need a ton of bright overhead light. They need a ton of blue light in order to do that thing and wake us up and produce cortisol and sync the circadian clock. But in the evening, even 1/3 of the amount of brightness that I have in front of you right now would really block my melatonin production, and as a result of that, disturb my sleep quality. And knowing how important sleep quality is for sales performance, this is going to affect the next day's sales, which is going to put me in a weird spot in which if I don't do stimulants, I'm not going to perform at my best, and then I will use stimulants, which will affect the next day's sleep, and so on and so forth. This is like, trust me, I've worked with over 120 entrepreneurs, sales professionals, people that have sales teams, with sales teams themselves, and we've noticed that firsthand that most of them are functioning on brute force, stimulants, and willpower. Um, and then to help your team optimize their light viewing behaviors, apart from telling them that they shouldn't have any bright overhead lights and should replace everything with things like Philips Hue lights that you can change the colors and you can put that below eye level. Also, using something like a blue light blocking glass like this here, or buying your team that, gifting them those tools here, like we do here with our clients, is going to help them to work during the night if you want them to do any admin work or call leads or follow up with leads, but at the same time not disturbing their sleep quality, because those blue blockers are going to help mitigate that bright light from the screen, and at the same time allow them to produce enough melatonin for them to recover properly at night. The next thing is going to be sleep supplements. Supplements like magnesium, L-theanine, and apigenin. You see, when you're on the phone all day, you're triggering the part of your nervous system that is responsible for the fight or flight response. So we have the fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and digest. So feeling calm, recovering, and sleeping. Naturally, as entrepreneurs or as sales professionals, when we want to get stuff done all the time and we have a limited time to do so, we are naturally going to be stimulated from our computer and from like putting out fires and from sales calls with high adrenaline and high cortisol, which is going to stimulate our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight. So our brain doesn't really know that we have a prospect on the other side of the phone, but it perceives like we are being chased from a predator. And this triggers the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response, as a result of the fight or flight response being triggered and our nervous system being wired, we produce more cortisol, more adrenaline, more dopamine, and we are on the go. Now, during the night, sometimes if you're on the go all the time and you're putting on fires and you're stimulated, this can have a negative impact on your sleep quality, because your body needs to have a balance between the fight or flight response and the rest and digest response. And if we imagine a scale between the fight or flight and the rest and digest, most people here, they have that scale tips more towards the fight or flight, and the rest and digest is super unbalanced, which leaves us not being able to fall asleep easy, waking up throughout the night, waking up feeling tired, and having brain fog, and not being able to function without stimulants. So there are tools that we can use. There are tools that you can literally buy for your team and send them so that they can use those tools and enable that rest and digest response before bed, so that they can recover properly and wake up the next day feeling sharp and recovered and productive and not burn out. So that's going to be super useful. Magnesium L-threonate or magnesium bisglycinate, L-theanine, and apigenin, the three best sleep supplements. Also, some of your team members, and those are things that you never would think of, but some of your team members might sleep in noisy environments, might sleep with their girlfriend, with their dogs, in bright bedrooms, like with lights that are penetrating the curtains, in suboptimal sleeping conditions. Long story short, so what you can do is you can gift them those sleep tools, sleep supplements, and sleep tools like earplugs, sleeping mask, and mouth tape to help supercharge their sleep quality. Because, for example, while you're sleeping, if you don't have blackout curtains and if you have electronic lighting or lighting from outdoors, if you live like in the UK or if you live in the city with a lot of building lights, this is going to disturb your sleep. And the reason is that your eyelids aren't strong enough to have light not penetrate them. So like essentially, light can penetrate your eyelids super easily, and as a result of that, block this melatonin production super easy while you're sleeping. It takes a very minimal amount of light during the night to block melatonin production, and as a result, that disturb your sleep and get you out of deep or REM sleep. So then we have earplugs, noise disturbances throughout the night in particular phases of your sleep. Your brain filters those noise disturbances and can wake you up, wedge you out of deep or REM sleep easily. So by using those tools here, you're going to allow your team to get far greater sleep quality, and as a result of that, recover better, wake up feeling more energized, have more consistent energy levels throughout the day, to take more calls and to close more deals. Because you might not think that this is important, but the way that your team communicates, or I guess your team's energy levels, productivity, and how focused they are on what the prospect says, how well they're able to manage their emotions, is going to directly affect their closing rate, no matter how well sales trained they are. The next thing is going to be keep them accountable using performance data. So not only keeping your team accountable through Slack using things like their closing rate, how many leads they talk to, et cetera, but also their sleep score, now that you have numbers, their HRV, the readiness score, and now you have the numbers as to what they're doing and what the time they're going to bed. And if they're doing the things that you're telling them to do in terms of all the things that we saw here, to actually positively impact their sleep scores and recovery. Because if you're essentially telling them to do all those things, you're buying them the supplements, you're giving them the tools, and you have the proper system in place, but then the next day you're like Bob wakes up with a crappy sleep score. He went to bed, like, for example, at 6 a.m. and woke up at 2 p.m. Like, let's see, for example, here, this is one of our clients, and we can clearly see with the data that he went to bed at 9:30, woke up at 6:15 a.m. So if we're optimizing their sales calendar between, like, and you can see that he's doing that almost every day here, right? We can see the consistency. So if we're optimizing the calendar based on this time, based on their circadian clock, and then we see that they're waking up at like 8 a.m., we can clearly keep them accountable and see that they're not doing the things that we were telling them to do. The next thing is building a dashboard using this data here that tracks their sales performance data along with their sleep performance data, their recovery and their habits as well, so that we have a holistic view of how everything is affecting all of the different parameters that are possibly affecting their closing rate. And to show you an example of how this would look like, we use this dashboard here with our clients that we're working with, and we track their adherence to the protocols that we're giving them, their routines and their habits, their closing rate, and we give them an overall ranking system, like a score out of 100 to see who is the best performing person. So we see through tracking, through data, through things like, for example, how many calls they're taking, how many offers they make, how many calls they close, their offer close ratio, their adherence to their diet, their exercise adherence, their daily routine adherence, energy levels, sleep score, readiness score, and we have a performance score for each one of the members collectively every single day, which is going to allow us to objectively see who is the highest performer using all the data. Because you can see on the surface, if you're only tracking sales data, that, hey, we see that closer number one is the highest performer because he's closing the highest level, he's collecting the most amount of cash. But what are the things that are affecting him to close at that high level in terms of a routine perspective, sleep quality, recovery, stress levels, so that we can repeat that across the entire team and scale it. Then the next thing is going to be tailoring their supplementation and diet based on their blood work. So in the beginning, if you did the blood work, you're going to discover their hormone levels, testosterone levels, cortisol levels, their metabolic health, and then you're going to be able to give them specific supplements that are going to help them optimize their health and, as a result, mental performance. Because, again, as an example, let's say one of the things that you could track in terms of the blood work would be potentially cortisol levels or testosterone levels. Testosterone levels are directly connected with sales performance because testosterone levels influence motivation, how many risks you take. Like, if you're super risk averse, there's a high probability you have low testosterone levels or you're lower on the testosterone spectrum. So just having high testosterone is going to make hard work feel easy and rewarding, is going to allow you to take better and bigger risks, is going to allow you to be more motivated and driven and focused to work, which all those things affect sales performance. So tailoring their supplementation towards optimizing the markers that are out of the optimal range is going to allow them to holistically perform at a much higher and better level. Plus, they're going to feel like they're being taken care of because you care about their health and performance and longevity, and as a result, they're less likely to churn, and they're going to be appreciated by the CEO and the team and the company, which is going to allow them to perform better because they feel better mentally, because they feel like they're being taken care of. As a result of that, stay on the team for longer periods of time without churning and saving you a ton of money and effort. The next thing is going to be limiting caffeine usage and stimulants, for that matter, to between 1 to 3 times a week. You see, caffeine increases the number of dopamine receptors and also makes them more sensitive. So in simple words, it makes everything that you're doing combined with caffeine more exciting and interesting. However, every single time you're drinking caffeine, especially if you're drinking caffeine every single day, the dopamine response you get from it, it actually slowly diminishes. So from, let's say, day one, you drink caffeine and you feel amazing. The first feeling that you have from caffeine, you're probably never going to have it again because you then drink it again and again and again. And so you end up going from day one to day 1000 to just drinking all that caffeine for a single droplet of dopamine, which means in order for you to get the same benefit or feeling in terms of dopamine and motivation and excitement that you once got from caffeine when you first drank it, you're going to drink twice or thrice the amount of caffeine to get the similar benefit, which means that you build a tolerance, and which means that you end up having to use caffeine in order to perform at your baseline instead of using caffeine as a tool strategically to perform above baseline when you need it. So for example, if your baseline is 5 sales calls a day, and this is like your normal average baseline, and then there are 2 days in the week in which you're doing 10 sales calls, then you use caffeine on those 2 days a week to perform above baseline instead of needing caffeine in order to function in your baseline. Then the next thing is going to be optimizing your hydration, especially when you're drinking caffeine, but in general, having your team follow a specific guideline and formula for hydration. Most people are hydrating wrong because you don't know what to hydrate with, and also you don't know how much to hydrate. So follow this formula. You can screenshot, you can pause the video and follow this formula, screenshot it, save it so that you can give it to your team. Apart from the numbers, you're going to want to hydrate with either reverse osmosis filtered water with extra minerals, or with some type of mineral water like San Pellegrino or Mountain something. I'm not sure exactly what the brand is for the US. But you're going to want to drink sparkling or either spring sparkling water, or in general spring water, which is high in minerals, or in some type of reverse osmosis filtered water with extra electrolytes, or Himalayan salt. That is going to be the best way to hydrate with. And by the way, the reason that I'm putting optimized hydration as a tool to improve sales performance is because even a 1% decrease in hydration levels shows in studies significant drops in mental performance. And this is because your neurons, the things that you have in your brain that are able to send thoughts from one place to another place and actually generate movement and action and speech, those are called neurons, and they communicate through electricity, electrical signals, and they require electrolytes and minerals in order to communicate with each other. And dehydration means a lack of electrolytes and water. So sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and all those minerals and electrolytes actually is what your neurons use in order to send those electrical signals and communicate with each other. And even a 1% decrease in hydration levels shows huge drops or significant drops in mental performance. So it's going to be paramount for you to optimize your team's hydration levels and give them a system to follow for that. And then we all know the feeling when some salesperson gets sick and they're not able to do the normal volume of work that they usually do because they're sick. So by following all of those steps here, you're going to help them not get sick that often, very significantly decrease the rate in which they're getting sick. But also, when they do get sick, you have a system, you have what I call the antiviral dream stack to deploy to get them back firing in all cylinders within 24 to 48 hours. All of those supplements here are backed with hundreds of studies to show how effective they are against viral infections and in supercharging your immune system. So if you have this protocol to use to give your team when they're getting sick, in the chance of them getting sick, you're going to allow them to recover within 24 to 48 hours max, and as a result of that, get back on the phone and perform at their peak mentally ASAP. Because usually what happens is they take like 5 days or 4 days where they're not really performing. They're still taking calls if they're like a grinder, but they're not really performing at the level that they are, and usually in their baseline, because the viral infection or them getting sick is affecting their recovery levels, is affecting their stress levels, and their energy levels as a result. So giving them that antiviral dream stack is going to drastically and significantly affect their performance, not only because they're able to recover within 24 to 48 hours with all symptoms, but also because while they're sick, they're able to give their immune system such a boost, which is going to make them feel hundreds of times better even while they're sick. If you do implement all of those 15 pointers, your sales team is undoubtedly going to perform much, much better. But if this is overwhelming to you and you want to have a system you can essentially follow step by step, a more structured system that we've used internally to help hundreds of entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and executives maximize their mental performance so they can make more money closer to a higher level as a result of unlocking peak mental performance, then what I want you to do is watch this video here on the screen where I show you the exact protocol that I've used with hundreds of entrepreneurs, sales professionals, and executives. And you can copy it for yourself, or you can even work with us to help you install the system for your sales team to help your sales team double, triple, or quadruple their work output and productivity.